So Karan, floor is all yours and take it
Thank
from
you
here.
so much. Good evening, everybody. Uh, Sorry we've got a little delayed and we've had to shuffle this session around because we also have the august company of Dr. Vijayalakshmy Gupta, who is the acting chairperson of TRAI here with us today evening for this rather interesting session on financing the media and entertainment industry, connecting the dots. I think all of you in this room and many more who were also part of the earlier sessions have heard various aspects of the media and entertainment industry, from the broadcasters to the print to new media technologies you will hear later, film content. So I will just introduce the panel to you and then we'll hand over the mic to Dr. Vijayalakshmy Gupta. On the extreme right, we've got Mr. Shibasish Sarkar. Mr. Shibasish Sarkar is from Reliance Big Entertainment, and he will give us a good perspective of all the very interesting things Reliance Big Entertainment has been doing, and he will share with us the studio model and some of the other very interesting businesses within his domain that he's been spearheading. To my right, I've got Mr. RDS Bawa. Mr. Bawa is, of course, been with the Network 18 group, and as a very large conglomerate in the broadcasting space, he will share with us a very interesting journey of how the group has now expanded, and from being a news broadcaster to regional broadcaster to GEC to the various businesses that he's been leading so dynamically. So we will get his views as well. We've got Ameet Naik on the left. Ameet Naik is a very dear friend and a very, very successful lawyer with a very strong industry experience and expertise, and has led some very interesting transactions, and he's going to throw some context to our discussion today, and I'm sure that will be very enlightening for everyone. Ameet's also been involved very interestingly with the distributors, copyrights, and various other transactions of various parts of the media and entertainment chain. To my extreme left, I've got Mr. Dev Khare. Mr. Dev Khare is the principal of Lightspeed Ventures, and it'll be very interesting to hear from him on the private equity and the strategic investments that he's been looking at, and we can also see and discuss what has been happening in the industry in that area as well. So now, without much delay, Ms. Vijayalakshmy Gupta, thank you so much for coming.
Karan, the co-panelist, and ladies and gentlemen. What I'll do is I'll not take much time because I find that we are already late and constrained for time. But since I represent the TRA as a regulator, I'll give an industry snapshot as what the regulator feels like and what is the focus 2013 which we wanted to hear today from all of you. As we all know, that entertainment and media industry broadly consists of four segments: television, print, radio, and other media, such as internet access, film, out-of-home advertising, music, gaming, and internet advertising. Currently, India is the 14th largest E&M market in the world with a market size of $17 billion. Industry stakeholders understand and acknowledge that India has the potential to achieve path-breaking growth over the next few years, possibly to reach a size of even $100 billion, provided the ecosystem is conducive. The compounded annual growth rate of the E&M industry for India for the period 2011 to 2016 has been predicted to be 17%, which is the highest expected CAGR in the international market. The average annual spend, that is per capita on the E&M in India, in 2011 was estimated to be $6.6, as compared to $22 in China and $65 in Brazil. While the consumer spend as a percentage of income is similar across the emerging markets, including our country, there exists a significant growth potential compared to the share of spending on the E&M in the mature economies such as USA and UK. The consumer spend as a percentage of per capita of the GDP is 0.4% in India, which is similar to that in emerging markets such as China, Russia, and Brazil. The rising household incomes in India is expected to drive rapid growth in consumer spend on the E&M. Consumer spend on entertainment and media contributes a major share in the total industry revenue and has been increasing at a fast pace over the last few years. This growth has primarily been driven by the rising disposable incomes and the propensity for households to spend on entertainment activities. The key consumer spend segments are television subscription, which is 58%, films, which is 19%, and print, which is 17%. Now I'll just give Karan the Focus 2013, which we from the TRA are looking for as far as this year's is concerned. Of course, media in all forms, that is print, television and radio, are undergoing major transformation. Media is probably the fastest growing sector in India, overtaking even telecom. India has certain strengths in the media sector, and media is content driven. We just heard in the previous session as how the content is king and why is it being called the king and not queen, etc. And Bollywood has created a body of content which holds not only our country but even our neighboring countries and the diaspora in the entire world in thrall. Few other countries would have something similar. Recent changes in the sector has opened up opportunities for the investors. The FDI limits in the sector has been enhanced on the recommendations of the regulator. Again, based on the recommendations of the regulator, government has amended the Cable TV Act, paving the way for digitization of the cable TV sector. The digital cable TV would become a vital infrastructure of the country. Besides enhancing the capacity of number of channels, the infrastructure could be used for providing a number of other services like internet, broadband, video on demand, and so on. TRAI has put in place a necessary regulatory framework for proper implementation of digitization and are effectively monitoring the same. Being such a massive exercise, there are implementation issues, especially on subscriber management system. This is being tackled. Public awareness is being created through advertisements and stickers on the TV channels and so on. I would be happy to listen to any of the concerns that the investors may have. Now I hand over to Karan. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Gupta. In fact, in the first session, we had a lot of debate on digitization and its rollout, and a lot of the sessions kept having a lot of deliberation on that. But I'm sure with the rest of the panelists and some of the audience, we might get into some questions. So thanks so much for highlighting, the efforts being made by TRAI. May I now request Ameet, Mr. Naik, to come and share a little context. Yeah. Ameet's got a presentation. Barun, that's...
As you must have figured out, I'm with a red tie, and I'm the lawyer on this panel. So I promise not to make it very boring and try to get it as quick as possible. I know we have a hard stop, but at the same time, it's a long day. Great. Madam Chairman, my co-panelists, it was about 8 years ago that I decided as a lawyer that M&E is a space for lawyering as well. And I can tell you why I felt that and why I feel even today that it was the right decision. For two reasons. One is the sector has grown magnificently and is where it is today. Madam Chairman also emphasized and said in context as to what 2013 is. I think as a regulator and the landscape and the regulatory landscape that you have is encouraging for investment. You look at FDI regime, you look at the sector, you look at what is happening in digitization, so on and so forth. Again, I think the hard task in any industry, whether it's media and entertainment and whether it's any other sector, is really the financing. And ultimately, I keep saying this to a lot of people, that the media and entertainment sector, when you contextually talk about media and entertainment in terms of financing, it's not very dissimilar from what is there in the infrastructure space or what we typically call as non-recourse funding. And I think that's the challenge in the sector, and that's the context that I would really like to say, that media and entertainment is not dissimilar to any infrastructure business. Ultimately, it's project finance, it's non-recourse, it's intangibles. So where it's intangibles and where you have tangibles, of course, it's different. What's the best nature and what's your financing model that you need to follow? My presentation is really focused on films because that's the context. We have Shibasish here, so he lives it on a daily basis. We sort of live that with many other people and many clients almost on a daily basis, where the challenge always is, what's the best model that you can have to discover and invent each time to see that the funding has a recourse? And again, what's the regulatory landscape for that also? In that context, my presentation is really confined to films, and I'm going to really run very quickly through that. Again, many years ago, documentation of films was unknown. It's today because a lot of funding, and I would say is balance sheet funding, so to speak. You see the value of documentation and you see the value of what you structure in that funding. And I think that's where the merit lies, and that's where you recognize and see what's the opportunity and what's the recourse that you have. There's a lot of things said about Bollywood and a lot of things said about films. But I must say that with the coming in of studios, with the corporatization in place, we have seen a fair amount of discipline. So today when you ask for a P&L, when you ask for a balance sheet, I think it's quite transparent. We need to still get there. But therefore the context again is that funding has become structured, funding is necessary, legalization or legal documentation vis-a-vis that funding in the industry has never been more relevant than what it is today. And therefore financing, and the topic is most appropriate when you say connecting the dots, because it's really connecting the dots, and that's the endeavor in the next couple of minutes. I know we have few people in the audience, but we're going to try to make it even more interesting. So Shibasish deals with films, Mr. Bawa deals with the television sector, and we have somebody on the private equity side. Again, there is a huge amount of interest in the M&E space generally. There are few funds, again, from a regulator perspective, Madam Chairman will bear us out on that there is, the SEBI, which is the Securities Exchange Board of India, and there are film funds that have been registered and are administering funding in that sense. So they have been in existence, they are working well. Of course, there have been some drawbacks on this, but again, there is a regulator in place. Again, funding, and I'll move again straight to the presentation in terms of the relevant models of funding. If you look at cinema, and contextually cinema, the challenge always is, what's the recourse? So you have a plain vanilla finance deal. Again, the producer approaches the financer. What the financer is really looking for in a film is really what's the charge, or what's the security that he can create. Like I said, it's again non-recourse funding. So other than the intangible, you're really not going to see anything. So you have a model where it's plain vanilla funding, and the plain vanilla funding is secured through intangibles as a paramount layer. You may have some kind of security in terms of postage checks and personal guarantees. Again, it's a huge challenge to ask for any of this from creative people. So again, while you may do all of the lawyering or you may do a lot of the financial planning, there is a great amalgamation between the creative side and the corporate world. And what's the mid path that you can achieve in reaching these financial models? Again, we have the NBFC norms. So strictly speaking, most of the models that you see in terms of funding are really co-production models that we come across, where obviously there is a joint venture, and I'm using the word joint venture very loosely in terms of how you co-produce and come together in financing. So this is against one of the other models where financing is against acquisition of film exploitation rights, which is the sale and purchase model. Again, I don't want to make it very technical. I'd leave the presentation for you to circulate and see, but there is one of the models that is available. Co-production is the most common, and I'd like Shibasish also to expand on that and tell you what it is. What typically happens when you look at funding from institutions which are film funds is there is a concept of introducing an instrument which is a debt instrument, whether you have an optionally convertible debenture with a coupon rate or whatever, that allows you to ultimately, and the panelists from private equity will also deal with that ultimately that is the sure shot and a safer model, where you are able to at least have an instrument as an instrument of debt and security, which is able to realize value for you, and in terms of enforcement also a good model. Again, this is pretty much what I was saying very quickly. In films, print and advertising is also very important. So you have a lot of last leg financiers coming into the fray and coming. So that is also one of the models that takes place. This is very important, and that's, I would say, sometimes a conundrum and sometimes not. Is corporatization and transference leading to more effective means of financing the M&E industry? I would believe so. We haven't ever felt that before, but even now, with institutional funding and with corporatization and with private equity participants, you're really seeing a growth. And I think that's a welcome growth. Obviously, there are issues around that also, but it's a welcome growth, and it's doing pretty well. Yes, I think this is a slide that I'd like to just spend a quick minute on. It's not a manufacturing-based economy and industry. Knowledge economy and innovation requires funding. So it's not very different in that sense if you look at an IT sector or otherwise. But it's the intangible that you take as security, which I think is relevant. So again, the intangibles is what I've illustrated on that next slide. Collateral of IP is the form. And again, obviously you have what are accounting standards, what's the best policy that you can adopt, so on and so forth. Challenges in funding is something that I've articulated in terms of how you have problems in terms of recovery. And again, access to institutional funding also is there, where you have institutions like NFDC and so on and so forth. I think since we have the chairman, but again, that's a different regulatory authority. I think the largest challenge that the industry faces is, you see, the taxing regime in this country is quite different because you have levels of state and central tax. That's one. The second is the subsidy. Ultimately, this sector also is a sector that generates a lot of employment. So the challenge is, again, there is what are the SOPs that you can give to this industry? What's the best mode available, and how can it be done? So I think that's something that one should really look at, and I'd urge people in this gathering to consider what's the best level of SOPs that you can actually give to the entertainment industry. Yes, so that's pretty much it. One of the things that Karan asked me to speak on, and very briefly I'll touch on that, is crowdfunding. I spoke on crowdfunding very recently in some other gathering. Believe you me, that's something that is catching up. There are legal issues around crowdfunding as to the source and the quality and the pedigree of the investor that you can take, because there are issues of money laundering and so on and so forth. You need to be mindful of that. I don't need you to be scared about it, but if there is an idea and there is a concept, then I think crowdfunding is also one of the ways. Again, in films it's not very easy because ultimately you have a lot of creative input. It's not always easy to put together that model, but crowdfunding is something that we are seeing is increasingly getting popular. And there are one or two films that actually, were out there as short films, which were completely funded through the crowd. Then again, the question is, what is the return on investment? I'd just like to say a couple of things and again set the context for my co-speakers. One, this industry has great potential. Two, as far as this industry is concerned, in terms of context, I believe that the time is absolutely right. You have a tremendous amount of corporatization. You have good private equity investments that are happening in the sector. What you also see in the private equity space in this sector is a lot of movement and investment and affinity towards service lines, because ultimately, suppose if there's a post-production facility, there is a lot of affinity towards having some kind of, identification of an industry focus where returns are commensurate and, more importantly, are secure. In the film business, it's a huge challenge. A larger section of filmmaking and a larger section, and my co-speakers will bear me out of that, the problem is that the costs of films is very high. Talent costs and director costs is again quite astronomically high and therefore difficult in terms of recoupment. Again, how a film does and what a film does is entirely left to you and us to determine. Therefore, again, I started the context by saying that it's non-recourse funding in that sense. And therefore, the challenge in being in this business is what's the best kind of, fundamentals in terms of how will you secure and make sure that there is recovery, or at least return on investment, and what's the best security for that. There are various models of film funding. I've discussed only some of them. What in India we don't have, again, in the context of the M&E space, particularly related to films, and we tried that for some films, but it didn't succeed, is the concept of a completion bond or a completion guarantee. There has been a failure of that, and the failure for that is also a reluctance from the producer to allow the execution of such a bond and the success and the money that is required to execute such a bond. Again, I believe contextually and keeping in mind the future, I think a lot of the ring fencing on that funding can take place if you have such institutions where you have a completion bond guarantee and you have a completion company which can take over and complete a film. Again, it's all easier said than done, but I believe as a lawyer in this industry, there has been a huge metamorphosis from what funding was historically and what it is today. And I think it's here to stay. We recognize and value documentation. We recognize and value financial structures and financial models. Financial structures and financial models ultimately are to facilitate and deliver money. The mantra really is this, that unless you deliver money to the financer, that's the mantra, you're not going to get any more finance. The financer also has to reap benefits, and I think that's the key. And therefore, I think it couldn't be said better that you need to ensure that you have a financial model that makes it possible, tangible, recoupable. I'd like my co-speakers to take over, and I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Ameet, for giving us that perspective from the legal and as well as the practical point of view. Shibasish, if we could take the film and the role of funding and connecting the dots to all the exciting projects you've led at Reliance Big Entertainment, maybe you can share some light on that as well.
Right. I think Ameet has already given an outlook or the structure of the whole thing. So instead of repeating the things, maybe what I would like to do, maybe share of some of my experience of last 15 odd years which I've spent in this industry. And to start off with, I completely agree with Ameet on one or two points which he mentioned. This industry, media and entertainment industry, is no way different from any other industry, whether it is a manufacturing industry or the service industry or anything, number one. Number two is that ultimately whatever you are making, whether you are making a film, you are making a soap, or you are constructing a estate, at the end of the day, every business has to give its return. So are you giving the return to his shareholder? Are you giving the return to his money lenders? Are you giving returns to quasi-equity guys? So at the end of the day, the business model has to be a positive. Now, those are given. I mean, I don't think that we need to add situations like it. But what happens in a country like India, and I'll take it a little broader, I'll say probably when we are discussing media and entertainment, we broadly divide the whole thing into two or three parts. Either someone is creating a content, that content may be film, that content may be television serial, that content may be animation, that content may be mobile game, that content may be digital online game, that content may be a console game. So somebody is creating a content. The next part is the guys who are, a section of guys who are basically ensuring that content reach the consumer. So either it is a pipe or it is a platform. So broadly, what we'll try to do, maybe in next 5-10 minutes, I'll share my experience in seeing that what are the different environments we have seen globally vis-a-vis India. Now, let's give me an example. I think in last, let's say last 6 months or last 1 year, the company which I represent, Reliance, we have been involved in producing films in Hollywood. We have relationships with Spielberg, DreamWorks. We produce films in Hindi in India. We produce films in regional markets, in Tamil, Telugu, different markets in Bengali. And I can lay out a situation that how the environment is very different. A year back, or 12-18 months back, we launched a film called Lincoln, which got released, I think, last month back, or last 45 days back. It got a lot of critical as well as commercial acclaim. The environment when you greenlit a project in Hollywood, or not necessarily Hollywood, any developed market from that point of view, you cannot shoot, a producer cannot shoot the first frame unless he has a financial closer. Meaning, if a film costs $100 or $100 million, before the starting of the film, the producer has to prove by means of instrument or by means of cash availability that yes, he has the available means of starting a film. That may be date, that may be line of credit, that may be letter of credit, that may be bank guarantee, that may be loan from the banks. That is very different from a situation. Suppose a year back I produced a film in India called, say, we released Dawn last December, Shah Rukh Khan's Dawn, maybe $25 million investment. In Indian environment, I probably can start a film with $5 or $10 million, or maybe 20%, 25% of the money, move ahead, try to think that how I can stitch in the balance amount of money. If I have a credibility and background, I'll be able to stitch in the balance amount of money. If I don't have a credibility and background, I may falter in between. The project may get delayed. There may be timeline delays. And at the end of the day, a project which may supposed to happen with, say, $100 may end up with a $120 order. So there is a lot of industry. It also depends upon the maturity of the industry. Let's look at another situation. I'm saying in India also is such a large country. The various parts of the country every part of the country is a very different India. When I work in the Hindi market, probably last 10, 15 years we have been working here. I'm saying from my personal point of view. And suppose when I go and release a film in, say, Tamil Nadu, or I go and release a film in Telugu, we produce a lot of regional films. I can't remember that in last couple of years I have ever released a regional film without spending the last 48 hours completely awake. It's a very different market. The night before release or the Thursday night, you are definitely, the whole team is awake and they are ensuring they are collecting money from every single exhibitor. And your whole negotiation is happening on that night. Otherwise, you will always end up in a situation that you are compromised and you are compromised on a gunpoint. That one day before release, people will come and say default. Whatever signed agreement you have the signed agreement in your hand, the distributor will come and say, boss, I cannot take the money, I don't have the money. Either you give the movie at a compromise or at the reduced rate, or I'm not taking it, it's your call. So the question to a large extent is that how much is matured as an industry. And the situation is not different. I mean, when I look at a situation like, say, I'll give a corresponding situation. When you look at a situation, say, animation, right? Now, in India, unfortunately, it's a country where there is no subsidy, there is no government grant, there is no tax credit in animation or even in films or any kind of structure. When I make an animation series or we make an animation series in say between Australia or France, basically studios come from different countries together. They pitch in their soft monies, they pitch in their tax credit. They tie up in a manner that a portion of the job happens in each individual country. And to that extent, it becomes an equity participation in that whole project. And in that extent, they recover that they make a model that how they recover how they will sell their rights and how they will recoup their investment. So, a very important point which Ameet mentioned some time back, that probably there is aspiration, that we have a correct resources, we have the correct talents, probably a lot is expected or a furthermore is expected from maybe the corporates, maybe the governments, maybe a state or the central governments. And we expect the different association bodies like maybe ASSOCHAM or FICCI or CI, they have to step in and ensure that when we can at least bring to a situation that it can be a level playing field. You will find that animation, at least last 5-7 years, 10 years, the basic concept we used to find a situation that the jobs used to get outsourced in India. The IPs are not used to created. So a studio in US or a studio in UK used to create an environment by they used to create the IP and they used to outsource India because your labor is cheap. Now that situation is also going away because countries like Philippines, Malaysia, Taiwan, they are coming out very fast. Their costs are as, their costs are as comparable to our cost. We are lucky that till China has not reached the stage, maybe English speaking is a large amount of barrier for them to enter this zone. But probably when countries like China, etc. will come, the whole outsourcing business which was happening to today in India in the animation sectors or the VFX or the DI sector, they will just evaporate. That will not be there. So, probably it's the correct time when we are saying there is 100 years of film industry or 100 years of content making in a situation, it's a correct time to think for the regulatory bodies, for the governments, to think that how they can ensure a more attraction of talent or content creation or job creation in the country in this sector. There is no lack of talents. And probably the most important point where people like maybe Ameet or people like the different bankers or the regulators, they have to be more, they have to be comfortable with the situation. I'll give you another example. Like we have